Now, I'm sure most of you noticed I just did a series of Batman reviews, which I do every January, and I decided to end this year's series of Batman reviews off with a retrospective on the Batman franchise that I did with my friends John, Chris, and Jeremy. Now, we didn't cover everything because honestly there's just too much to cover. Like, we didn't even touch on any of the animated Batman films. Specifically, what we did for this was we started off talking about the comics, and then we talked about all the live-action Batman movies, and we ended this talking about the Batman TV shows, animated or otherwise. And you are about to watch part 1, where me and my friends discuss the Batman comics, and then we talk about the 1940s Batman serials, then we talk about the 1966 Batman, then we talk about the Tim Burton / Joel Schumacher Batman series. Then in part 2 of this video, we discuss the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and then the Batman movies that are part of the DC Extended Universe, and then we talk about the Batman TV shows. Hey guys, welcome to my retrospective on the Batman franchise. Doing this retrospective with me is my friend John.
Hi, how's it going? I am a huge Batman fan.
Chris.
Huge Batman fan too.
Hello there.
Alright. Basically, what I want to do with this is I want to start off talking about the comics and some of the history of Batman, then we'll talk about the live-action Batman movies, specifically the live-action ones, because I feel like since there are so many animated ones, we'll be here forever. So we're really just going to focus on the live-action ones. However, in the third section of this, I want to talk about the Batman TV shows, animated or otherwise. So let's start off talking about the comics. Now, the character of Batman was originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. He first appeared in a story from Detective Comics number 27 called The Case of the Chemical Syndicate in 1939, and one thing I think is interesting about Batman is, like, if you look at some of the old Batman stories that Bob Kane and Bill Finger did back in the 30s and 40s, they were a little goofy by today's standards, but some of them were actually kind of dark, like especially the first Batman story ever written, Case of the Chemical Syndicate, that almost reads like a detective story or like a mystery thriller in a way, and it actually ends with Batman punching the villain into a vat of acid, which I think is hilarious because everybody goes on about how Batman doesn't kill, which of course has become a staple of the character now in comics, but yeah, in that original Batman story, he outright murdered the villain in a really horrible way. But what's interesting is, like, if you notice, like, the Batman comics, while they started off kind of dark while a little goofy as well, they definitely got goofier as time went on, especially by the 50s and 60s with, like, the comics code and stuff. But then by the 70s, they started to get dark again with, like, the Denny O'Neil stuff, and then I would say it was definitely the 80s where you saw the birth of the dark and gritty Batman stories. Stuff like Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's Year One, Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, and then Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which I think those 4 comics definitely informed, like, the live-action Batman movies that would follow, but what I want to do here is really talk about, like, what some of our favorite Batman comics are. So, any of you read the comics?
Yeah, I would say some of my favorites are The Dark Knight Returns and Batman the Killing Joke. I also do enjoy Nightfall. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many great ones out there, but those are some of my personal favorites.
I really love the Scott Snyder run from New 52.
Oh, I agree with that. That's really good.
I cannot recommend it anymore if you consider yourself a Batman fan, because he did such cool stuff with the character. He had a great, like, 52-issue run. You know, they gave him a lot of leg room.
Yeah, I would say, I'll admit, of that run, I've only read Court of Owls, and I've read Death of the Family. I still need to read more from his run on Batman. But one thing I like about Scott Snyder's run is there's a lot of horror elements in his Batman stories. Yeah. But John, what Batman comics have you read?
I've read Year One. I have read Nightfall, but that is like a really long story. And
oh yeah, I've only read the first volume of Nightfall myself.
Also, Dark Knight Returns is one of my favorites, and I also like The Killing Joke.
I also trying to think what else I like of the Court of Owls. That was a great one. Like wow.
Yeah, and my top three, honestly, Batman stories are The Dark Knight Returns, which I would say is probably my favorite Batman comic, and is also one of my top 15 favorite books of all time. The Dark Knight Returns, Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, and then Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which I don't know if any of you've read that yet, but
Which one?
Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth.
I did. That was like whoa, like really like the most bizarre like Batman comic I've ever read. It was like a mixture of like if David Lynch wrote that comic.
Yeah, I read
was
that too.
Yeah, it's basically a psychological horror story that just happened to feature Batman, and I actually consider it to be in a way kind of a ghost story, but not like a literal ghost story. It's more so because it's sort of a meditation on time and the idea of time being non-linear. So, and you see like that time is the ghost, and like it's the ghost of the past haunting the present. Like it's sort of almost like a metaphorical ghost story in a way. But I cannot recommend Arkham Asylum enough.
Yeah, I also just love in that story how the artwork is just so garish and it so perfectly suits the setting of Arkham Asylum.
I thought the Joker like in that comic was more scary than like the Heath Ledger version of the movie. It was like wow, like this is like the most scary and bizarre Joker look I've ever seen in comic books in my life.
And then, if we want to talk about like The Dark Knight Returns, one of the things I love about The Dark Knight Returns is it is a Batman story, but it also very much reads as like a dystopian novel because it's set in like a dystopic near future. And I do notice there are a lot of comparisons you can draw between Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore's Watchmen, which I think those were probably the two big comics, which I think changed the face of comics forever.
I feel like when at that time Alan Moore was like becoming a big like a comic book star in the comics. Then like after that he just like disappeared and didn't do much after that.
Oh, he's done a lot after that. Yeah.
But I haven't like kept up much of his recent stuff recently though.
Well, he really didn't disappear. He just won't work with mainstream comic book companies anymore.
Yeah, he just did a Lovecraft-inspired comic book series called Providence.
Let's check it out.
He has nothing but contempt for DC Comics now.
What are some of your other like favorite Batman comics?
Oh, the Jeph Loeb run, like Long Halloween.
Oh,
Dark
yeah.
Victory.
Yes, great one.
These are great because they really kind of epitomize what Batman is. Because Gotham sort of goes from a town that's run by the mob to a town that's run by a lot of gimmicky costume freaks. Mm-hmm. And those stories kind of best emphasize it because throughout Long Halloween, you just have the entire Rogues Gallery in it, like showing up, and then Dark Victory is essentially like adding Robin into the mix. And then,
you know what I consider like the Jeph Loeb, especially Long Halloween and Dark Victory. They're basically think The Godfather meets Silence of the Lambs meets Batman, and that's basically the Jeph Loeb run, I would say.
Yeah, it was so like cleverly done, and you can kind of see what he's pulling from. Yet he's also kind of doing something different with it because it's this whole murder mystery, and the really freaky thing still about Long Halloween is we still don't know who the fuck did it even today. It's like this long lasting mystery for Batman.
There's
fans.
no resolve in that story.
Yeah,
and it's also a great Two-Face story too. Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain, so I think that's a great origin story for Two-Face as well.
I believe The Dark Knight actually took inspiration from that story.
Absolutely.
Chris Nolan was inspired from a lot of the long. When I read The Long Halloween, I'm like thinking about like Chris Nolan's like inspiration for the films. I'm like, oh my god, so this is where I got it from.
There's actually an edition of it where he writes the introduction.
Yeah, I have that actually.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I gotta read that.
Yeah, I also really love like some of the Batman horror comics. Like obviously, like I mentioned Arkham Asylum, that I count as a horror comic. Some of Scott Snyder's stuff, but like I don't know if any of you've read the Elseworld Batman comic, Batman and Dracula, Red Rain.
I did. I read only just one of them. But I know there's two more of those, but I haven't gotten a chance to read those.
They're very good.
They are.
I haven't read this, but I've also heard of Gotham by Gaslight.
That one I haven't read.
They're making an animated movie.
They are.
It's
coming out in February.
Because basically, it's being marketed as Batman fights Jack the Ripper.
Yes.
And, that sounds awesome.
I would love to.
I agree.
I'd love to
That'll
read
be
that.
awesome to see.
Yeah,
I
also recently read The Doom That Came to Gotham, which is basically a Lovecraft-inspired Batman story.
Which sounds sick. So.
Yeah, it is sick. It's really good. I actually really love the Elseworld Batman stories because I feel like those are they're free to do whatever they want. They're not really tied down by any continuity and stuff. And honestly, I don't really take the continuity of Batman that seriously, only because he has such a long history that, okay, it's kind of a suspension of disbelief to believe that all these different Batman stories could be in the same continuity. Right. So I think in a lot of ways, a lot of Batman stories work better as standalone stories.
Definitely.
Even The Killing Joke, honestly, even though that is in continuity with the rest of the comics, I mean, what happened led to Barbara Gordon becoming Oracle, but the way that story ends, I feel like it would have worked so much better if it was in its own continuity.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been like a debate, like did Batman really kill the Joker?
Well, I mean, if it's a standalone story, then that you could say, yeah, maybe he did, but of course, since it's in the overall continuity, then obviously he didn't.
Yeah, and I also read an interview somewhere online, I think it was a Q&A with Alan Moore, where he did confirm that no, Batman did not kill the Joker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's like maybe like us for our decision to decide like whether he did or didn't.
Yeah, well, once again, that's why I think it works better outside of continuity, especially because there's even the implication that maybe the Joker could find redemption. But once again, if it's in the overarching continuity, it kind of makes the whole thing pointless.
I do love the ending of that one, though. Because it's kind of... He flat out tells the Joker at the end, like, look, you can stop. Like, I'll help you even. Like, we'll get you the help you need. And he just kind of, like... There's almost like a beat of silence, and he just goes, no, it's too late. I'm too far gone. Like, he almost has, like, a moment of sanity.
Yeah,
and I just love how there's this kind of moment of, not reconciliation, but, like, of brief sort of peace and understanding between these two enemies who have been enemies for so long.
And that comic does a great job at making you feel sympathy for the Joker. Especially because what he does is so fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
That's where, like, it can be challenging for me for that book, is where, like, you have no sympathy when he shoots Barbara Gordon in the abdomen, she becomes paralyzed, and then later on, like, after when he gives this, like, speech to Batman, like, and it's like... How could I feel sympathy for this guy when he just did to Barbara Gordon?
Yeah, but I think Alan Moore knows that. Like, and I don't think there's any black and white in that comic. Like, it's very much like, you know, there's no defining... He even, like, basically paints this idea that Batman and the Joker are mirror images of each other.
And I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely... There's a reason it's considered to be one of the best Joker stories ever written. Another really good Joker story is, I don't know if any of you have read Brian Azzarello's graphic novel, Joker.
Yes.
I haven't read it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, Suicide Squad actually took some stuff from that, like the whole idea of Harley Quinn being a stripper, and then like
Frost is in it.
Mm-hmm. Which that's another thing I don't like about Suicide Squad, because Johnny Frost is a great character. I mean, he's a bad guy, but like, still, he's an interesting character. And all he is a background character in Suicide Squad. Then there's the Batman vs. Aliens comics, which I really like. I don't know if any of you read those.
I did. I loved them. They were great. Loved them.
They were a lot of fun if you just want to have fun with like a cool concept. Because they've actually been doing that a lot with Batman lately. He just met the Shadow in a comic. He just met the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Which I think is funny that he met the Shadow, because I forgot to mention that the character of Batman was definitely influenced by a lot of the pulp novels and stuff. Like the Shadow, and even Sherlock Holmes, in a way, you could see as being sort of an inspiration behind Batman. And I do like the Batman stories that emphasize the fact that he is also a detective. Mm-hmm. And some of the best Batman stories are the ones that read more like thrillers or more like mystery novels, in a way.
Here's some... I always love it when I read Batman when he, like, crosses over with, like, you know, like, random, like, fictional character, like Alien, Predator. I always find that fascinating. Did you ever see the Dead End short they did to that?
Yeah, I saw
Wasn't that pretty awesome?
That was, yeah.
Also, Under the Red Hood comic. That's a great comic to read.
That one I haven't read.
Oh, read it. It's really, really good.
The animated adaptation is fantastic.
Yes, it's phenomenal. It's like one of the best Batmans I've ever read in my life. And
Also, what do you guys think of Year One? Because I have to say, I'm not like the biggest fan of Year One. I like it, but for some reason, just doesn't thrill me that much.
There's not a lot that happens in it. Admittedly, it's very simple and it's very straightforward. And really, it's more Gordon's story than it is Bruce's. Yeah. It's kind of like Bruce's origin through the eyes of Gordon.
Yeah. To be fair, that is something I like about it, but I don't know, for some reason, it pales in comparison to, like, Dark Knight Returns, or even some of Frank Miller's other stuff, like Ronin or something.
It is the definitive origin. I don't think you could take that away from it.
Yeah.
But on top of that, Scott Snyder himself, actually during his run, during that big New 52 run, he did a story called Zero Year, which was this, like, crazy, expansive version of the origin that took a lot of influence from the Frank book, but he kind of put his own spin on it. And there are these really great scenes that actually recreate moments from year one in like new ways, and it's a really good read. I recommend that too.
I think year one is actually, believe it or not, my favorite Batman like graphic novel of all time, because I think it's like the definite origin story of Batman, especially how like how he comes back to Gotham after being away for a few years, and he's like trying to like find like, how can I terrorize them? How can I like put like fear inside of them? And
what I like about that one, though, even though it's not like one of my favorites, I do like how it comes off as being very reality based. Like there's really no fantastical stuff in it. You could easily buy that as being in the real world, even though there are references to Superman at a few points. You could definitely see, though, where Nolan took a lot of inspiration from year one. Also, I do recommend the Batman Earth One graphic novels, which are they're basically another retelling of his origin. They're very good. I highly recommend those.
I mean, I like year one too, because I also consider it the definitive origin story, and I also like that Christopher Nolan did take a lot of inspiration from it for Batman Begins. And I just like the idea that, you know, Gotham is so corrupt when Bruce comes back that, you know, he and Gordon they have their work cut out for them, you know.
That old fight scene that Gordon has with Flass in the woods.
Flass is just a real nasty character.
He is.
The actor who played him in Batman Begins, I think, did a very good job at making him extra sleazy.
Now let's talk about the live-action movies. First, I want to talk about. You could argue whether these are actually movies or not. I kind of count them as movies. I do want to talk about the 1940s serials, which were 1943's The Batman, and then there was another one in 1949 called Batman and Robin. I don't know if any of you guys got a chance to watch those at all.
I saw them a while back.
I haven't seen them since I was a little kid, because I remember the first time I saw them was on Turner Classic Movies. Then years later, like around like the mid 2000s, my dad bought them all on DVD when they were released, and they were. I mean, I didn't really watch them recently, but looking back, it's kind of like they're not really bad. They're just like they're outdated. But again, that was considered the best Batman quality at that time, which I can understand.
Well, I mean, also, it was the first adaptation of the comics.
True.
I mean, and also, the comics actually owe a lot to the serials, because there were a lot of things that were not in the comics at the time that were in the serials and then were later incorporated into the comics. Like, the whole concept of the Batcave originated from the 1943 serial. And I would say it's fun. The issue with the first one is it's a propaganda piece, because it was around World War II. We were at war with Japan at the time, and the main villain is a Japanese scientist named Dr. Daka, I think. And I love in that where when Batman finds out that he's Japanese, he goes, "Oh, a Jap!" Like he's more... Okay, alright. I didn't think it was that funny, but it's more... He's more shocked by the fact that the villain is Japanese as opposed to the fact that the villain's doing horrible things. And the word Jap gets used so many times in it.
I haven't seen that in so long. I have to watch that again.
I watched like the first 45 minutes of the first one on YouTube, and I mean, I can respect it for being the first adaptation of Batman, and I can respect Lewis Wilson for being the first actor to portray Batman, but all in all, it's pretty silly. I mean, look at his costume, for example. It looks like it's it's falling off.
Yeah, it looks like kind of a... I'm pretty sure cosplay didn't exist at the time, but it basically looks like a bad cosplay of Batman.
It looks like it's about to, like one false move and it'll accidentally tilt back. It's like cheaply made.
But I mean, in the black and white era, costumes were costumes. They didn't really give
I mean, I get that, but...
And it was clearly made for kids, too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, also, the actor Lewis Wilson who plays Batman, I mean, like I said, I can respect him for being the first one, but, I mean, I just gotta mention... Does anyone know what kind of accent that is that he's using? Because it just...
Keep in mind, it's been a while since I've seen either of them.
Yeah, same with me.
It's just, I mean, I guess that's his natural accent, but it doesn't sound good for the character, to be honest.
I haven't seen the thing in a long time. I'll watch highlights on YouTube like you did.
What about you, Chris? How long's it been since you've seen them?
Oh, it has to have been since like childhood.
Oh, all right.
I mean, I was introduced to this stuff primarily through the Burton films and through the cartoons, and then, obviously... young me was just like curious about like where all this came from, and then obviously you watch this weird ass propaganda movie where he's like bitching about Japanese people. But thankfully the sequel to it, like all that racism is kind of gone, and it's more like a
Well,
straightforward.
also the war was over at that point.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I do love. Well, I don't love this, but there is a part where the narrator is talking about like the internment camps that they had back during World War II, and the wise American government rounded up all the Japs.
Yeah,
It's so racist.
I also want to add to that the actor who plays the main villain, J. Carroll Naish, it's obvious that he's not Asian, and he's really just, over-exaggerating his performance. It's like...
Yeah, it's the stereotypical, like, "Haw! Batman, haw!"
That's exactly what it is.
We'll just assume that it was like early influence for the Penguin, because like he has that same kind of gait,
Well, when did the Penguin get introduced in the comics?
Around like the 40s.
Well, I know that, but I mean, like, I'm not sure if it was maybe before or after this
I
movie.
think it was after, yeah, because I remember like his first big villain was Dr. Death, and I think that came in like his second story arc, and for a while he just kind of had no real like recurring bad guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to remember when the Joker came in. I think
Night-
he was
night-
like one of the
num-
first big ones. But...
Batman number 1, 1940 was the first ever Joker.
thanks.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to mention about Lewis Wilson is that, he lived for a long time. He died at age 80, so I thought, why wouldn't he have had anything to say about Batman in the years since, especially after it became so popular? There's like no interviews with him available, and I read on this one site that it was actually because he would just kind of turn down the interviews. And,
I guess he was a private guy. I guess he wasn't interested in doing interviews.
he just turned them down. He didn't like to... I read that he didn't like to talk about the Batman role, basically.
I would have wondered what his thought was about, like, was he alive when the Keaton version came out?
He was. He died in 2000.
Okay.
Now let's talk about 1966's Batman. What's so funny, Joe? What's so funny?
Go on.
What's
go
so
on.
funny, Joe? What's so funny?
All right.
What's so funny? What's so funny? Okay.
You antagonizing John is the heart of this podcast.
Yeah.
Is it?
It is.
All right. Okay. Now let's talk about 1966's Batman the Movie, which was a spin-off of the Adam West Batman TV series from the time, which is infamously goofy. At the same time, though, the comics at the time were pretty goofy as well. As I mentioned before, by the 50s and 60s, the Batman comics went from being dark crime stories to being really geared towards children, which is understandable. This was the time of the Comics Code. But we're not really going to talk about the TV series till maybe the third section of this. I want to talk about now the movie adaptation of the TV series. So, what do you guys think of the movie?
Well, I always enjoy it, just like I enjoy the TV show, and yeah, it is pretty goofy, silly, and over the top, but it's got, this great charm to it, and, I always love the characters, love seeing them triumph over the criminals, and... I think the campiness works for this movie and for the TV show.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a comedy. Like, There's no way in hell they actually think anybody's taking this seriously.
Oh, absolutely not. And the actors know that, too. That's why their performances, I think, are pretty good.
I also love, there's a scene in the movie where, like, the villains launch a torpedo at Batman and Robin, and you don't see it, but apparently a porpoise came in front of it, and while they're moving away, Batman's like, what a noble move of that animal.
Yeah, he actually says, that noble porpoise, he gave our lives, he gave his life for ours. I mean, he says it so straight and so serious.
Chris, what do you think?
That was the appeal of the 60s Batman for me, because you had these actors deadpanning such silly dialogue. Like some days you can't get rid of a bomb, like all the crazy, there's all these great one-liners all throughout it.
Okay, John, you're laughing your ass off. You're clearly just fidgeting right now to talk about this movie, so talk.
Well, to be honest, I'm not really much of a fan of the I respect people who are a fan of it because I get it, because people grew up with this show, and some people appreciate it for the time being, but I'm not much of a fan of the 60s Batman show that much, because I think it's corny, stupid, campy. I just can't get into it.
But it's meant to be all those things.
I know.
That's the appeal of it. Yeah.
And I love comedy, but this just isn't for me.
Yeah.
It was, I guess you could say, from a more innocent time for comic book movies.
Oh, yeah.
I think that we owe this kind of a debt of gratitude, because between this and the Burton films, I think that's what sort of popularized Batman in the mainstream.
Fair.
Yeah, definitely.
So as much as we were introduced to it in this really like silly outlet, at least people did have a lot of fun with it and they loved the character, and then they were open to when he went dark. So.
I particularly love the shark scene,
Yes.
where like he's like, Robin, hand me the shark repellent bat spray, and Robin just conveniently happens to have shark repellent back.
Yeah, and
bat
also
Jaws
the,
meets Batman.
And also, it's convenient that the force of the bite didn't automatically break Batman's leg, and just rip it off.
You know what I just realized? It's funny because he fights a shark in Venom, the comic book story.
Yeah.
And I wonder now that I think about it, is that a callback to that? Because they did like to do little shout outs to the 60s show even when they started getting darker. Because I remember I think it was a Stephen Grant book where he actually calls Robin Old Chum at one point.
Right.
And a lot of people were pissed about it because they were like, do not bring up 60s Batman.
Yeah, I mean, and I also noticed during a lot of the fight scenes, they're a lot of fun to watch, but I mean, nowadays with the power to pause the movie, it's so obvious that a lot of the villains, when you see them punching or getting hit, it's obviously they're stunt doubles. It's like painfully obvious.
It's not like nowadays when you see like a big action movie star actors that do their own stunts.
Well, I mean, they don't do all their own stunts, but when they do have a stunt person, they try to make it as less. They make it less obvious.
I mean, look, not to get off topic, look at the Star Treks. Every time I watch the Star Trek 60s show, you can tell it's a stunt double. It's not Shatner or Nimoy doing the fights.
The actors in the movie are a lot of fun to watch. Adam West, Burt Ward, and of course the villains, Cesar Romero, Frank Gorshin, Burgess Meredith, Lee Merriweather. I never get tired of watching them.
Vincent Price's Egghead.
Yeah. Well, that's more the TV show, though. He wasn't in the movie.
Point,
yeah.
Actually,
We'll talk about the TV show soon, don't worry.
I just love how Burgess Meredith, when playing the Penguin, he, tries to, give the Penguin a nice good squawk, whenever he laughs. He really tries to play out the whole Penguin part of it.
Oh, yeah. Burgess Meredith was great.
Yeah, he was wonderful.
You're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder.
Yeah,
I know that's not
that's
this
Mickey.
movie.
Yeah,
I know, John. I know.
I mean, he's an actor who's just had so many great roles, in Batman and, also
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone and Rocky, just a wonderful actor.
I will admit, I actually do like the villains in the film. I like Cesar Romero as the Joker and Lee. There were actually three different Catwoman actresses. Eartha Kitt and who played her in this one?
Lee Merriweather.
I just wanted to bring up that it's weird how casually they go from Catwoman being white to black.
Yeah.
That is
It's never
But
addressed.
also, for 60s television, that's still pretty revolutionary to have, a black main character and stuff.
That's
Especially
true.
since nowadays there's controversy when they change the race of characters when it goes to different mediums and stuff. So it's interesting that in retrospect no one gave a shit that Catwoman was black all of a sudden.
With having Eartha Kitt come on the show, that was around the time when civil rights was going on at that time.
Yeah.
She's a fantastic actress.
Yeah, she is.
Fantastic
I love
actress,
Eartha Kitt.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, like I said, all just a great bunch of actors. And, Adam West, he really put his all into performing as Batman, And even though he did get severely typecast, because of it, he did always, I believe, have a huge appreciation for the people who were fans of him.
I was going to meet Adam West at Monster Mania a few years ago, and me and my friend were online to meet him, and when I found out that Adam West was charging $80 for an autograph and not a picture, I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah,
and I left him.
I didn't admire that part, but I did have the pleasure of meeting the man actually twice. The first time was at the Super Mega Show, and he was charging $60 then, but he did.
60 is not as bad as 80. Though.
Oh, I agree. And when I did get up to him, he asked me my name. I told him Jeremy, and he shook my hand and said, "Oh, I'm glad you came, Jeremy." And the second time was at Chiller Theater in 2015, and that time I just got the photo with him, Burt Ward, and Julie Newmar. And, with the pro photo ops, you walk in quickly, they snap the photo, and you go out. But, I was excited, so I said, "Oh, thank you, just for being awesome, and for all the times, the enjoyment from the TV show." And he's like, "Oh, thank you." So it's a nice memory I have.
Back in the 60s when the show was on the air, my dad got an autograph. I don't remember if he either met Adam or maybe he got the autograph or some catalog or something back then. He still has that autograph today. I'm curious to know where he has that autograph.
Now let's move on to the Tim Burton / Joel Schumacher Batman series. Called that because Tim Burton directed the first two films of this series, and Joel Schumacher directed the last two films in the series. Now, this series started out in 1989 with Batman, directed by Tim Burton. And this movie for the time was freaking revolutionary, and I think it took a lot of people by storm, because at the time, even though the comics were definitely getting much darker with stuff like Alan Moore's The Killing Joke and Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, both of which were definitely inspirations behind this movie. Like, the comics were definitely getting darker, but as far as the mainstream was concerned, Batman was the Adam West show. So I think it really surprised people how dark this movie was. Now, the film is a little campy, and intentionally so, but for the time, this was probably the most serious you were going to get out of a superhero movie. But what do you guys think of 89's Batman?
I love this movie. I mean, it definitely helped bring the darkness back to Batman at a time when he was most remembered for, biting shark repellent and exploding dolphins, stuff like that. So I will always have that deep appreciation for it. And, Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson make quite the pair.
I love it because Burton really brings his sensibilities to it. Because his films are always about, like, outsiders and, like, being rejected and stuff.
Yeah.
And Batman and Joker are sort of like these two yin and yang freaks together. And the thing that really changes up their relationship in this one is, in this one, I think there's even a scene where they say, we made each other. Yeah. It's, for people who might not have seen it, Joker is the one who kills Batman's parents in this one.
Yeah. Which I have sort of an issue with that, but I'll get to that after you're done with your point.
And then, obviously, Batman is the reason he falls into the vat of acid, and we get, like, a definitive identity for him in this one, Jack Napier and all that, and it really changes up. It makes the characters a lot more intimate in this one. They have a very different kind of relationship where they very much bounce off each other.
Yeah. What do you think of 89's Batman?
Love it. It's one of my favorite Batman films of all time. One of my favorite films of all time. What I love about it, how it stays true to, like, the Bob Kane 1939, early 1940 Batman comics. And yeah, I agree. Like, Nicholson, he steals the show in this film. Like, every time I watch it, I never get tired of, like, watching it over and over again, how great he is in the film with the Joker. And Keaton, like, despite what people were like, upset about, like, how he's going to be Batman, people are thinking, wait a minute, Michael Keaton, like, Mr. Mom's Batman, like, if you look at, like, Keaton, I think Keaton is a well-run actor. He can do you no wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And I love this movie, but one issue I have with it is, it's not really an issue. It works for the movie, but I could see this being an issue for people, is, as Chris said, they give a definitive origin for the Joker, which, to me, one of the things that's most fascinating about the Joker from the comics is you don't know his origin. You don't know where he came from. Even the origin that's given in The Killing Joke, that very much implies that could just be in the Joker's head. Like, maybe that's the Joker trying to justify, at least to himself, why he does what he does. And I think the Joker's more interesting that way, where you don't know where he came from. But in this movie, they give him the definitive origin where you realize, oh, he was this mobster named Jack Napier who got thrown into the toxic waste acid, and that's how he became the Joker. Which works for the movie, and it does work thematically, because you find out he's the one who killed Batman's parents, but I'm just saying, like, for the movie it works, but in the long run, I think the Joker is a much more interesting character where you don't know his backstory. Would you agree with that at all?
I would agree.
Yeah, so would
yeah.
I.
It works well for this movie, but outside of this, because a big part of it is that he's such, like, a cultural icon, and the idea of him is just like a force of chaos and anarchy and just, like, total psychosis. I think giving him an origin definitively forever, that does kind of take something away from him.
Yeah,
so.
it definitely makes him less scary, to know that, he's just, he could be, like, regular like us. If that makes any sense.
Also, the Joker, like, even, like, himself does not know, like, what, like, where he, like, came from, like, where he was born and stuff. It makes it, like, more fascinating and interesting. And
Yeah.
also that, Tim Burton, at the time when he was hired to direct the film, he was inspired from The Killing Joke. He loved it so much, he said it was his favorite comic book he ever read, because he was never really into comic books as a kid growing up, but that was, like, really his favorite comic book of all time.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out about Tim Burton is, I do like his earlier films, but they don't really have a lot of rewatchability for me. Like, I can watch them, but don't really like. I've seen Beetlejuice, and it's a great movie. I've seen Edward Scissorhands, great movie, but I haven't really had the desire to go back and watch those movies again. Batman is really the only Tim Burton movie that I really can watch multiple times. Keep in mind, I still haven't seen Ed Wood yet. I do want to see Ed Wood.
That's a great movie.
No, I haven't seen Ed Wood. I'm sorry.
You love Universal Monsters, and you would love that movie.
Oh no, I'm sure I would. But in general, though, a lot of Tim Burton's earlier films, they're good movies. They're just not the kind of movies I see myself watching over and over. That could also be because I feel like Tim Burton's movies have kind of been co-opted by the whole Hot Topic audience. So I think that's sort of a thing that detracts me from those movies. But once again, 89's Batman and Batman Returns, they're like the two Tim Burton movies I can watch multiple times. But how do you guys feel this movie fits in with Tim Burton's overall filmography?
I think it's one of his best works.
Yeah, this is definitely very distinctively his movie, I would say.
Yeah, and, he assembled... The movie looks great, very dark, very gothic, and he assembled a great cast. Yeah.
At the same time, it's clearly set in sort of a heightened reality, which I like. It kind of has this very, almost surrealistic atmosphere to it.
And also, Jack Nicholson as the Joker, that was that was just a great performance to watch.
He stole my balloons!
This town needs an enema.
Bob Gunn.
If we can't do business, we'll just shake hands and that'll be it.
Oh, I got a live one, yeah.
He's creepy in a lot of scenes, and yet, he does get a little over the top at times, but not to the point where it becomes unbearable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's great because it's like, he's funny, like, he's hilarious in the movie at the same time. He will freaking kill your ass.
Yeah, but he likes to entertain you first.
And I think that's sort of the appeal of the Joker, because the Joker has so many different personalities. You could get the really funny Joker, then you can get the freaking scary as fuck Joker.
Yeah.
And it both works because, books like The Killing Joke and Arkham Asylum establish that he has no real personality. Yeah. He's, constantly reinventing himself every day. So this is a character, Jeremy, you and me talked about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies recently. Well, you guys were part of that, too. But we talked about how goofy Freddy got.
Yeah,
but
it got...
unlike Freddy, the Joker's a character where he can be goofy and serious at the same time.
Yeah, even when he does, like I said, it's not so over the top where it becomes annoying, like what happened with Freddy Krueger in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. It's a good, I think, a healthy balance. Yeah.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Clarence, and then he starts playing the Prince song.
Prince. Actually, I have some comments about that. As much as I respect and like Prince's music, but if they made that film today, they would not use Prince or heck, they would even use maybe artists like Lady Gaga or Justin Bieber today for a Batman film.
I don't know.
Why would they? Yeah, why would they do that? You're out of your mind.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I have to say, I actually, and I'm not the biggest Prince fan, but I really do like the soundtrack for this movie. I actually have the soundtrack too. For some reason, I feel the Prince songs fit the movie so perfectly, especially the Party Man sequence where he's going through the art museum and just tearing the place apart.
Yeah.
And then, at the parade scene...
Gotham's 200th anniversary.
Yeah, where freaking Trust is playing, and the Joker's
I love that, yeah. I just love the Joker's methods of killing people in this movie. You got the joy buzzer, you got the pen, and of course, the gas. When I first, as a kid, saw this movie, and I just saw, with the news report, the anchor woman... in the newsroom when she succumbs to it and you first see that creepy permanent grin, I just was creeped the fuck out by it. It was so nightmare-inducing.
And there's so many great quotable lines in this movie.
Yeah.
The pen is truly mightier than the sword.
Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
What?
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts!
Jack Nicholson, he just knocked it out of the park with this movie.
And so did Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
I think all the actors did a great job. What do you think of Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent? Because I personally don't mind Harvey Dent being a black guy.
I think he does a decent job. Grant, in this movie, he's a smaller character in this movie than he would become later, so there's not much for him to do other than, try to get things under control as the district attorney.
That is my one criticism of the movies. I think, characters like Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent are definitely more background characters. especially Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon is such an important character in the whole Batman mythos, and like here he's just like, you know, kind of a background character.
Yeah,
He's just there. There's like really not much to him in
It's
the movie.
interesting that you say that because I remember seeing an interview with the late Pat Hingle, who plays him, and yeah, he mentioned that Commissioner Gordon is supposed to be the one who was comforting Bruce Wayne after his parents' murder, and unfortunately they didn't include that in the movie.
And also, even like, you have the scene in the beginning where Bruce Wayne is having a party at his mansion, and like, you see Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent gambling, and not for nothing, I never saw either of those guys being gamblers. Harvey Dent maybe after he becomes Two-Face, but like, both of those guys I don't really see as gamblers at all.
I never really thought too much about that.
Me
but, I
neither.
mean, it's a big upscale party hosted by one of Gotham's, as
The-
lack of a
the-
better term, greatest citizens, so of course they would be there. I mean,
Well, also because they were trying to raise money to like have like some festival, like 200-year anniversary festival.
I mean, you know, it's... And about, yeah, I mean, I do agree that they are kind of sidelined. You know, when we do see Harvey Dent, you know, he's like on the phone trying to figure out what the Joker's, you know, poison scheme is. You know, he's not really in on too much of the other action besides that.
Yeah. I do like, in that party scene in the beginning, one thing, for some reason I really love this, you see Bruce Wayne, like, drinking a glass of champagne. Every time he puts a glass down, you see Alfred right behind him, picking it right up.
Well, that shows how loyal he is. How...
Oh, and I think this movie does a really good job at showing the relationship between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Like, you could tell these people really do love each other. Especially the scene where, like, Alfred is telling Vicky Vale all those embarrassing stories about Bruce as a kid.
Alfred, why? That's probably what Bruce was thinking at the
And
time.
I think Michael Goff is great as Alfred.
Yeah, I agree.
He was a great actor. You know, he was also in the Hammer Dracula
Loved him
movies. And
Have you guys ever seen Hammer's version of Phantom of the Opera?
I have not.
I haven't. I've never seen
I
it.
have not.
Yeah, in that one, the character he plays in that one is a complete piece of shit.
Right, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And then you had that really spooky scene where the Phantom just like kind of comes to him and it sort of corners him, and it's very freaky, but you almost feel like a sense of relief because he's such a prick in that movie.
Yeah, and, oh no, he deserved to die, that character, in that movie,
Wow.
but we're getting off topic, obviously.
Yeah, one thing I don't like about Alfred in this movie is, I think a qualm that a lot of fans have is, he let Vicky Vale into the Batcave. That is such a breach of trust. You know, she was a good character, but, you know, who knows? Maybe she could have been a spy. I mean, Alfred doesn't know her personally, you know?
Oh, I just
they even play on that in Batman Returns, actually, which
Yeah,
we'll
they
talk
do.
about in a little bit. But yeah, I think 89's Batman is an excellent movie.
I also just want to make mention, you know, about the scene where the Joker, you know, kills Carl Grissom, you know, the main, at that moment in the film, mob boss. I think it's just like one of the perfect revenge scenes because he set him up to be killed at Base Chemicals. You know, I just like how he slowly walks in, you know, all intimidating, and you know he's smiling because he can't help it, but you can just see the rage underneath it, and it's great. You set me up over a woman! And I also want to just mention Bob, who is, you know, the Joker's right-hand man, and, you know, I think I like to consider Bob to be the Joker's Alfred, you know? I mean,
That's a good point.
He's so loyal to him. I mean, he's so, you know, he's pretty much at Joker's beck and call. Like, even at the beginning of the movie where Eckhart, you know, tries to shoot him, immediately Bob gets over Jack's shoulder and gets a gun right into Eckhart's
That's why it's kind of a shock when he kills Bob.
Yeah, it's like, how could you do that to your most loyal henchman?
Well, that shows just how psychotic the Joker is. That shows how far gone he is at that
Yeah.
point.
That's right.
I also love where, like, the freaking plane is heading towards the Joker and it's just like, hit me! Hit me!
Yeah, that's a criticism I have for the movie. You know, I understand, obviously, that these movies require us to suspend our disbelief, but how the hell could Batman miss every single shot? He's not even
Joker.
moving.
The Joker takes him out with one shot from that long long-nosed revolver.
Yeah, and one thing I think is interesting is, in this movie, you see Batman murder a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a kid watching that, I never like complained. I never like gave it a thought because as a kid, like reading the comics, I realized he killed in the original comics, and in some other versions he didn't kill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but now it's sort of a staple of the character. Like, that's his moral code, that he doesn't kill. But yeah, in this one, he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, and one criticism I actually do have for this version of the Joker, and that's really, it's not Jack Nicholson's fault, it's more the way the character was written, is that this Joker could not hold his own in a fight. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the times he's having his goons do the dirty work, and in the final confrontation with Batman, Batman kicks his ass, and the one time he does try to fight back, he breaks his hand and has to go, ooh, ooh. It's like, yeah, he's no fighter.
I would like to see somebody do an incarnation of the Joker where he really can hold his own in a fight.
I thought Ledger's Joker could.
Well, I mean, it depended on that one, like on sort of circumstances. Like he would always be, he would be like sicking dogs on him or stuff like that.
Yeah, but he still got in on the action, whereas Jack's Joker kind of took a backseat most of the time.
One of my favorite moments in the film, and like the opening scene when you see those two muggers hit the father and they steal the money, and they go up on the building, and they're talking about like how there's this Batman going around like harming people and stuff, and then they're like, nah, it's all fake stuff, and then there's a moment pause, and they're like, there's Batman, and as a kid, I used to like rewind the hell out of that thing as a kid. Like, I thought it was so cool. I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention is, I don't know about you guys, but I loved the character of Alexander Knox, the journalist who
Robert Wise, I think is his name.
Yeah, he's funny. He's good.
Yeah. He might have been my favorite character in the whole movie. I'm not sure.
I read that they were originally going to kill him off during the party scene. He was going to succumb to the gas, but because Robert Wool was so likable, they decided to let him live.
I'm actually kind of disappointed that they didn't bring him back for any of the sequels.
Yeah.
He said that's one of his biggest regret about being in the first Batman film, never being in the sequels, that he never got a chance.
Now, do any of you guys know if the character of Alexander Knox is a character from the comics at all, or was he just made up for the movie?
Probably for the movie. I never read one comic where he was the character. Not that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those great characters that wasn't in the original comics, but he worked so well with the film that he was in,
So, 89's Batman was huge when it came out, and one thing I forgot to mention is one thing I really like about the movie is it really does work as a standalone film. Like, it really didn't need a sequel, like the way it was all set up, but now we come to 1992's Batman Returns, which I happen to enjoy a lot. Like, I think it's probably one of the most unique Batman films ever made because it's so distinctively a Tim Burton film. It's like a Tim Burton film first before it's a Batman film, but I happen to really enjoy this one just because of how surreal it is, and it almost works as like a gothic horror film in a way. And once again, I mean, I'm not even like a diehard Tim Burton fan, but for some reason that's something I really like about this movie is how distinctively Tim Burton it is. And I also think Selina Kyle's origin is interesting, how she is murdered by her boss, but somehow comes back from the dead, and it doesn't really explain how she came back, which is, the Selina Kyle in this movie is definitely not the Selina Kyle from the comics, but I still thought Michelle Pfeiffer did a great job in the movie. I actually think Michelle Pfeiffer, believe it or not, I think she did better outside the costume than she did when she was Catwoman. I feel like she had a lot of really lame one-liners in the movie, which I don't think really worked too well, but as Selina Kyle herself, I thought she was excellent. But what do you guys think of Batman Returns?
Well, you brought up that it's more like a Burton movie before it is a Batman movie. I would totally agree with that. It's sort of like him kind of dialing it up in terms of style and in terms of visuals to make it very much his own thing. So it's almost like the first one was sort of like him like stretching his legs with Batman, and this one is him really making it his own. Particularly with how he does the Penguin, because the Penguin is like just this like total outcast. I mean, like since birth, he like grew up in the sewers with these penguins.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this version of the Penguin is definitely Tim Burton's own vision. I mean, he is an ugly, grotesque freak with a murderous plot to kill all of Gotham's firstborn sons. Yeah, that's Tim Burton-esque.
I do want to point out, though, that you could definitely tell that the design for the Penguin in the animated series was taken off this Penguin, though.
It was definitely influenced by it, although it was a bit toned down. It wasn't as, disgusting.
No.
I don't think he had the flippers in the cartoon.
No, he did. In
he did.
He didn't have the bile coming out of his mouth.
No,
though.
thank God.
I always thought was the grossest part.
Yes, I agree. That part always grossed me out as a kid.
Yeah, it was very disgusting. I remember too. Yeah.
But one thing I like about, or I think is interesting about the Penguin in this movie is, in the beginning you sympathize with him. Like, he was abandoned by his parents, and maybe that's what led to him becoming as disgusting as he is now, but still, he's repulsive in
Oh,
the
yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if I want to say you sympathize with him or you pity him. I feel like you pity him more. Like, you don't... it doesn't excuse his behavior, but you kind of understand what made him become this way.
I
It's
agree.
50-50.
Yeah, I agree that to a degree he's, to be pitied, especially in one of the early scenes when he brings Max Schreck down to the sewer and he, gives this, very passionate speech about how he just wants what the good people of Gotham take for granted, to know where he came from and to be accepted in society. And you realize later that that was all an act.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's just... The Penguin himself, is a good actor. The character, and of course Danny DeVito. I mean, the character was also in a freak show, so he had to perform. So he's learned, I guess.
Yeah. I want to point out that the Penguin in this movie, if you notice some of his behavior, especially towards women, he's a sexual predator in this movie.
As a kid watching this, I never got that message and hint about that he was a pervert. I'm like, this guy's a freaking pervert.
And you are the hottest young person a role model could have.
That always I don't know why that part always creeps me to this day sometimes.
I'd like to fill her void.
I know. And then freaking the way he's hit it on Catwoman.
Yes.
Man.
Just the pussy I'm looking for.
Do you remember the part when they're on the roof and they see the bats are destroying Gotham and he's like, so what are we waiting for? Let's start. When he's going deep into the details, I'm like, oh, I don't want to picture this. Please don't even.
Yeah.
That's the worst part of watching that scene.
Yeah, I mean, Danny DeVito just does a great job. He gets so, into it. And I read that he stayed in character between takes. And, it couldn't be easy to act under all that makeup. In fact, my dad and I met him at one of his Bottle and Cases signings, and I actually asked him, what was wearing the Penguin makeup like? And he's like, oh, well, it took 4 hours to put on, and I was in it for 66 days. Which I think tells you all you need to know about the experience.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Danny DeVito said to this day, he said, that's not the... looking back when he made the film, he would, keep the secret from his family and kids and not, know what was going on with the movie because he didn't want to scare them.
What do you think of Michelle Pfeiffer as Selena Kyle in the movie?
I like her a lot. She's obviously very different from the Selena in the books, who's very much believes in herself and is a sort of a whip smart, if you'll excuse the pun. Sort of burglar.
Wasn't she a jewel thief in the comic? Because I don't remember. Okay, exactly. I thought so.
And here she's rewritten as this really meek woman who, after sort of dying and coming back, turns into a completely different person. So it's a cool flip from who she is in the comics.
Yeah,
and it definitely speaks to obviously what Burton is bringing to the table.
There's definitely sort of a feminist undercurrent with her character, I would say, where she's sort of a pushover in her everyday persona, but then she becomes much more of a strong woman when she's as Catwoman in a way.
Yeah, I think Michelle just does a great job playing both, meek, repressed Selena Kyle and then fierce, feisty Catwoman. And I know you said you don't like a lot of the puns in this movie.
Yeah, that did not do it for me.
But I gotta say that I always enjoyed the line. I thought it was hilarious, when she first has the flip out and puts on the costume, she says, I don't know about you, Miss Kitty, but I feel so much yummier.
I hated that line.
Really?
But also I hate the word yummy. I think adults who use the term yummy need to be shot.
Well, she was, when you see her flipping out and breaking all the stuff in her house, you see she has stuffed animals, she has a doll's house, which I think that hints that maybe she's a little bit,
Oh no, that's one thing I liked about this movie or her performance is you could tell this woman is very tortured.
Yeah.
Psychologically tortured. You don't really know what happened to her, but you could tell this woman's damaged.
I mean, she works for such a shitty person. I mean, at the beginning, he just outright humiliates her in front of everyone in the board meeting.
I want to point out that I think Max Schreck is the true main villain of the movie.
I would agree.
Yes.
Yeah. And Christopher Walken does a great job at playing
this
piece of shit.
Bruce, shame on you.
And he's another villain that wasn't in the comics.
And it was inspired from Nosferatu for Catwoman. I do like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, but I feel first when you first see her, you do feel bad for her because the way Walken treats her. Then later on, after when she becomes the cat, she kind of is a little weird and strange at times.
Yeah, well, I think that's the point.
Yeah, I was always disappointed that they didn't bring Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman back for future installments because I think they really could have taken that character a long way.
Yeah.
Is it? Should we mention briefly about the Halle Berry Catwoman? Okay, no, I didn't think so.
Another thing I want to mention about this movie is that I love Pee Wee Herman's cameo at the beginning as Penguin's father. And especially because later on, they actually had him play the Penguin's father on Gotham. And I thought that is just too perfect.
I love that. Yeah.
They wanted Burgess Meredith, but they turned him down because he was having he turned it down because of Alzheimer's.
And, I also... The chemistry between Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, is also very good.
Yes.
They both are trying to hide their dual identities, and, they go to great lengths to... And it's like, they are kind of the same, as Bruce says.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I actually really love the scene where they both figure it out. Like, the way they both act.
That was very well done.
Yeah. It was.
And that was a great line, about the mistletoe being deadly if you eat it, but
the
the
kiss
kiss being
being
even deadlier.
If you mean it. I have to say, they were, when you think about it, they were, like, so perfect for each other. They were, like, had the same personality. Because if you think about the first film, like, with Vicky Vale as the love interest, I don't think, did he really even care about Vicky Vale when you think about it?
Absolutely.
Of course he did.
Yeah. What the hell's wrong with you,
He went
son?
out of his way to save her from the Joker and his goons at the museum.
He did, but I think because he was concerned about, like, having a girlfriend because he's Batman.
But what about when he goes to apologize at her apartment? He cared
That's true.
about
Yeah,
her.
that's true. Okay, that's true. Yeah.
I would say that the bond between Bruce and Selena is deeper than what was between Bruce
Yes,
and Vicky.
that's my point.
I'll admit that. But it's because they obviously relate to each other in the same way. Like, they're both people who, in their regular lives, just have no solace whatsoever, and they both find themselves in these identities.
Yeah.
Which is a great flip to the Penguin, who is trying so desperately to be a regular person, as opposed to the freak that everybody sees.
Yeah, and that brings me to the line towards the end where he says to Batman, "You're just jealous because I'm a genuine freak and you're just a man in a mask." I think, and yeah, Batman even says, "You may be right." I mean, I also just love how Danny DeVito at that point, because of all his plans going awry, he just lets, his rage out and just swings that umbrella wildly at Batman, just going, ah! Ah! I mean, he really lets this monster out.
Also, the one thing that also made me a little bit upset about this film was when they kidnapped the Ice Princess, when the Penguin throws his umbrella and the bats fall out and she falls down the building, and it's like, Batman, would you throw your batarang and save her? Like, why couldn't you have saved her?
I guess he was afraid that if he threw the batarang, maybe he'd miss and it would push her off.
Well, or he could have just, I don't know.
He was I think he was like trying to, if he would have inched like close to her, do it slowly and carefully, because one false move and maybe she would have gotten scared and stumbled off.
Even before the Penguin throws the umbrella, she could have just jumped off, like, just,
And I love Danny the Penguin's line, "Rats with wings, do your thing," right before he says that.
I feel like this was a good film, but I think that when it came out, it was criticized for how dark it was, because everyone was saying, "Oh, this is so gross and so dark." My kids were, because people thought this film was more of a kids thing than really this is for adults really more than for kids.
Quickly talk about these other two scenes. The one where Max Schreck he's gathered all the political people to try to build a political campaign for Oswald to be mayor, and he introduces him to these two image consultants, and they're very superficial, and one of them even mocks him by saying, "Not much reflectiveness in the sewer, is there?" And this guy, what the Penguin does to him next, this guy kind of had coming. It's like,
it could be worse. My nose could be gushing blood.
And then he actually does it. He bites his nose, and everyone's all shocked. But Max Schreck just diffuses the situation by saying, "Okay, back to work, everyone." And then they all act like that didn't happen.
Yeah, you do feel an odd sense of sympathy for the Penguin.
Yeah.
Because of his backstory. But even though the Penguin still does a lot of it to himself, too.
Yeah, plus, there is, when Bruce is doing research on him in the Batcave, and he finds out that I think we can say that it did happen, that he was involved in the link of child disappearances when he was performing in the circus.
That's another thing, too, I always found messed up about the film, was when, when Batman exposes the real truth behind the Penguin after that speech, is that he wanted to kidnap all of Gotham's firstborn children, and I'm like, this is messed up. Really, this is no wonder why the film was so criticized, because of that one line when Batman's saying that he wants to kill the children, and also I was about to say, I like the part when they're kidnapping the children, they're like, "Would you hurry up and load those children up?" And he sees the Batman shadow, he's like, "Oh," and it grabs him.
Yeah, I like that actor Vincent Schiavelli, the one with the sad eyes. He was a good actor, and I also like how they did Penguin's, death scene, where, he's been so damaged, injured by the bombs and everything, that he can only just, walk very slowly because he's in pain, obviously, and it's all, the bile's all coming down his face and the blood, and he tries to kill Batman, but, he grabbed the wrong umbrella. Still trying and determined to kill Batman, even though he himself is dying. That just, I think, shows how ruthless this villain is, and the way the Penguins, after he dies, just, they give him a proper burial. They dump him in the water. And
Funeral.
And I just love the music that plays when you see his body sinking. It's perfectly fitting for that scene.
Sometimes I also wonder if Burton had stayed on this franchise, what could the third Batman could have been about.
So now let's move on to Batman Forever, the third film of the now Tim Burton / Joel Schumacher series, because this one was actually directed by Joel Schumacher after everybody complained about how dark Batman Returns was, so they hired Joel Schumacher to make it a little more lighthearted. I have a special history with this movie because my parents actually took me to go see this movie when I was 3, and according to them, I cried so much that they had to take me out of the theater, and all I remember is the fucking, the Riddler in the glass case thing, and I guess that freaked me out when I was a little kid, so they had to basically leave the theater because I was crying so much. Of course, I saw the movie again years later. So I have sort of a special history with this movie in that regard. Also, I used to like this movie a lot when I was younger. Now I freaking hate this movie. But I hate it mainly because, as I mentioned before, Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain. I just find Harvey Dent to be such a fascinating character because, to me, he's almost like a symbol of all of Batman's greatest failures, and he's sort of a symbol of lost hope. And Tommy Lee Jones maybe could have been a better Two-Face if it was a better script, but I freaking hated Two-Face in this movie. I think Joel Schumacher raped Two-Face. But what do you guys think of Batman Forever?
Well, I'll start by saying that it is very, very unfortunate that Warner Brothers decided to drop Tim Burton as director. I mean, he's listed on this film as a producer, but I doubt he really did much in this production. Of the two Schumacher films, I believe this is the better one, but it's definitely got flaws. But, it also does have a lot of enjoyable parts to it.
I would agree. It's got some enjoyable parts, and you do see Schumacher's fingers all over it, obviously, because the flashiness is just amped up.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, if you see some of Schumacher's other films, they're not quite like this, though. Especially stuff like 8mm, which is a very dark movie.
Sure.
Yeah. Lost Boys.
Yeah, Lost Boys.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Unfortunately, I think these movies have given Schumacher a really bad rep because of both these movies, a lot of people say, oh, Schumacher, one of the worst filmmakers ever. It's no, he's actually a great filmmaker. It's just these two movies he did sucked.
I think what it was that when he was hired to do Batman, he was kind of being forced and pressure to make it more family friendly, kid friendly, and also when you see Lost Boys in another film, you say to yourself, this guy could have done a darker Batman version, but it was really the studio pushing him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of pressure from the studio after the complaints about Batman Returns being too dark to make this one lighter. And, he had to answer to them. But, a lot of the stuff, a lot of things in that movie were still his decisions. the bat nipples. I do enjoy Jim Carrey as the Riddler. I think his brand of over-the-topness was suitable for the role in this particular...
Especially how he was just coming up around this time.
I heard that because of how over-the-top Tommy Lee Jones is as Two-Face, I heard Jim Carrey actually said, when they weren't filming, dude, tone it down a little bit. Which, that's sad when Jim Carrey is telling you to tone it down.
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because Jim Carrey has said that he and Tommy Lee Jones did not get along at all.
And I love Jim Carrey. I'm a huge fan of his, but in this film, he's just I think he actually can be a serious method actor if he had to, but he just takes a little bit too too corny, too more like the '60s Riddler. And
there's a lot. That's I think one of the things that Jim Carrey does best is he gets over the top, and most of the time it works. There is that scene, where he's got his boss strapped to the chair and he's testing out the mind extraction. He's just dancing and going, I'm sucking out your thoughts.
Feeding on your brain.
Yeah, feeding on your brain.
Before that, when he knocks him out, caffeine'll kill ya. Around this time, Jim Carrey was like rising at the star with Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, and The Mask.
I think he brought a good thing to Riddler, despite he's known for being over the top.
Oh yeah.
He does have a great presence.
Tommy Lee Jones being over the top, though, that's a different story.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that part where it's towards the end, and he just goes, and me, and it's just.
And you talk about the problems with Two-Face. The weird thing throughout it is they keep saying that he has split personality. That when he got hit in the face with the acid, it changed him, but. He doesn't really go between personalities all that much. He just has a dark side that got let out.
Yeah. And also, if you notice, I remember, keep in mind, it's been a while since I've seen it, he actually, at points when the coin doesn't give him the answer he wants, he flips it again.
Yeah,
it's that's not how it works.
That is a complete betrayal to the character.
Because he believes in chance. Yeah.
And also, this movie really, the thing I love about Two-Face is he's a sympathetic character. Yeah. But this movie, you don't feel a lot of sympathy for this Two-Face.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other versions of Two-Face, you do see him before he becomes Two-Face, and you do think, wow, he is a likable guy, it's horrible what happened to him. I mean, other than a brief news video in this movie, you really don't see that at all. It's really just him being a bad guy.
And also the fact that Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent were friends, too. Yeah. Which is another tragic thing about the character of Two-Face. And, personally, I think, outside of the comics, the best iteration of Two-Face is the Two-Face from the animated series.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But yeah, this Two-Face just raped the character, in my opinion. To be fair, I have read the original Two-Face story that Bob Kane and Bill Finger did in the 40s. That one was actually kind of goofy, and I would say this Two-Face is somewhat true to that Two-Face, but I think the character, it became so much more mature as time went on that they were going backwards, in my opinion.
I mean, there is that scene at the end where, he actually does say, oh gosh, you're right, you always were a good friend, Bruce. I think that's the only thing we get, which hints at, that he was originally a good person and that he and Bruce had this relationship.
And also, shouldn't Two-Face be black in this movie, since Billy D. Williams played him in the first movie?
Joel Schumacher Billy D. Williams actually did have it written into his contract that if the character eventually became Two-Face, he would be allowed to play him. But Joel Schumacher, for whatever reason, wanted to cast Tommy Lee Jones, so he decided to buy out the contract.
As a kid watching that, I always said to myself, wait a minute, the first film, it was Billy D. I'm like, where is he in this film? But like you said, it was changing.
Yeah. And also, when Tim Burton was still going to direct the third Batman movie, Two-Face wasn't even in it. It was just going to be the Riddler. So that Two-Face only got added after Joel Schumacher took over.
I read that Robin Williams was going to play the Riddler in that one, which I think it could have been maybe interesting, but we'll never know what that will be like.
I read that when Tim Burton was still directing, the Riddler was going to have a pet rat.
Wow. That's random.
That is random.
Well, we're talking about Two-Face. I just wanted to bring up something for you because you actually mentioned that you love Two-Face. There's actually a story by Bruce Timm in an anthology called Batman Black and White.
Yes, I read that one.
Two of a kind. It's so good, especially if you love Two-Face. It serves as a great epilogue to his story in the animated series, but also as insight into him, just in general as a character.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite Two-Face stories.
Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I think that's why I hate this one personally more than Batman and Robin, because once again, it just destroyed, in my opinion, one of the greatest Batman villains, and honestly my personal favorite Batman villain.
Have you read All-Star Batman?
No, I haven't.
You need if you love Two-Face, you need to read that.
Yeah. Okay.
I also want to talk about Val Kilmer's performance as Batman. I mean, it was definitely a big change from Michael Keaton, who just, he stayed on for a bit, but once he started hearing in the meetings people saying, oh, why does it have to be so dark? He said, yeah, this is going to go downhill, and jumped ship,
People ask Keaton, why did you turn down 3? And he said it sucked. That's it. Simple answer. And also, whenever I watch this film, I feel like the only person who takes himself seriously, even though he has some cheesy, corny liners, is Val Kilmer. He's the only one that's taking it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think Val in the movie, he can be a bit wooden in certain parts, but ultimately I think he does a good job.
He does.
Especially the ending where he does, his big speech to the Riddler about how, I had to save them both because I'm both Bruce Wayne and Batman, not because I have to be, but because I choose to be. I think he did that very well. A lot of people, I believe, they also do, though, praise Val Kilmer's Batman because, unlike Michael Keaton's, his Bruce Wayne was a little more, he was more social, he was more, kind of the image of the playboy that Bruce Wayne tries to keep, whereas Michael Keaton's was more kind of sullen and sulking in the shadows.
What do you think of Val Kilmer's Batman?
I will say that his demeanor as Batman, I think, actually is very evocative of the comics. He's very kind of like brooding and very direct. So I'm not crazy about his Bruce Wayne, but I do like him just as Batman. I think he works well in the suit.
All right. I hated Val Kilmer's Batman. I just wanted to get your guys' opinions first. Yeah, he, in my opinion, was one of the worst Batmen. In my personal opinion.
Not as worse as George Clooney.
Yeah, George Clooney was terrible.
Relax, John. Harvey, I'm Batman!
Yeah,
It's not that funny, John.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, his performance isn't perfect, but yeah, I'll take it over George Clooney's any day.
One thing I want to point out about it, though, is, okay, in the movie, Robin wants to kill Two-Face because Two-Face is the one who kills Robin's parents in this movie. But Batman's like, no, once you do that, you'll never go back. Wait a minute. Are you forgetting that you murdered a bunch of fucking people in the first two movies?
Joker included.
Yeah.
Well,
Who
maybe
killed your parents?
with this interpretation of Batman, maybe in keeping with the lighter tone, maybe they're trying to imply that, he kind of regrets all those killings and now doesn't want Dick Grayson to follow in the same path.
That's a possibility. But another thing is, like, in the movie you have the character of Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman, and Bruce is very infatuated with her, and there's a part of the movie where he's like, I've never been in love before, Alfred. And I'm like, what the hell happened to Vicky Vale and Selena Kyle?
She definitely was in love with Selena.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
I
what,
think
Bruce, are you that much of a slut that you forgot about them?
I think I agree. So Selena Kyle was the one he was really in love with the most out of all the bunch.
Yeah, and like all of a sudden you forget about them. Now you could make the argument that this is arguably not in continuity with the first two movies, but at the same time though, you still have Michael Gough coming back as Alfred, you have Pat Hingle coming back as Commissioner Gordon, and even the flashback to Bruce's parents getting killed in the movie is the same flashback from the first one. So it's arguably in continuity with the first two movies, but for some reason they ignore Vicky Vale and Selena Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I always did consider this, even with those, things you mentioned, I did consider this to be in continuity with the previous films, and, as far as whatever happened to Catwoman, there is that one line that Chase Meridian says where she's like, oh, what do I need, leather and a whip? She says something like that.
Skin tight vinyl on a whip or something like that.
Yeah, when Batman says to her that she's not his type.
Yeah.
And I just love how they in this movie, they made the Riddler, like, idolize Bruce Wayne. And,
That was a great
that really gives, when Bruce Wayne rejects his invention proposal, that really gives that character a lot of motivation, which I think worked well.
You were supposed to understand.
I'll make you
understand. Jim just delivered that line so perfectly.
Yeah,
I mean, he's really good at playing an obsessive creep. I mean, just look at his performance in The Cable Guy. Yeah, he's a lonely, obsessive creep who has no life, so he lives in that weird, shut-in place.
Oh, yeah, his obsession with Bruce Wayne makes Annie Wilkes' obsession with Paul Sheldon look like a high school
yeah, doesn't
crush.
he have, like, magazine covers with Bruce Wayne on the cover taped all over, if I remember correctly?
I never thought of it that way. Misery meets Batman.
Yeah, and,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Back to Val Kilmer, he, I believe he said that he was a Batman fan before taking on the role. In fact, he took the role right before there was a script.
I could see that, and you know what? I do think Val Kilmer's a good actor. If you see The Doors, I mean, he was Jim Morrison in that movie, but also, I just did not like him as Batman, though.
Actually, Bob Kane said he was the best Batman out of all Batman actors.
Well, Bob Kane's not one to talk, because I think Bill Finger deserves more credit than Bob Kane got.
That's true.
Fucked up Bill Finger never gets credited as, like,
well, now he does. They recently started it.
Yeah,
they recently started including them both. Like, if you watch the credits for Batman vs. Superman, it says created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger.
Oh, good. Okay.
Like, yeah, that's, and I think that's the reason why I sort of resent Bob Kane, is only because of that he's always gotten sole credit for the creation of Batman, and it's like, no, Bill Finger was there too, guy.
And, Just one thing I want to mention, and this is, I guess, something that could also be talked about during the discussion for Batman and Robin is, I read that Val Kilmer and Joel Schumacher did not get along during filming at all, and that's part of the reason he replaced him with George Clooney. I mean, I've read that Kilmer is has been difficult on a lot of sets.
Oh, he was. Back in the 90s, he very much was very difficult. I don't know if you ever heard of The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes.
Yeah, he helped destroy that movie.
Yeah, and he actually did apologize to Richard Stanley years later, though, which is good that he apologized.
It was mainly his fault that he got fired. I did have the pleasure of meeting Mr. Val Kilmer at Monster Mania in August last year, and, he was only doing the photos at the pro photo ops. So when I got to do his autograph, I unfortunately couldn't stay because my dad, who was my ride home, wasn't able to stay. So I asked the woman who was working with Val at his autograph table if I paid, could I just do it here? She said, okay, wait outside. He was behind a tarp. And, she then came back out after she spoke to him and said, okay, he'll do it. So we took the photo, and then I said, I loved you in Batman Forever, and I could very faintly hear him say, thank you. And that was just a great memory.
Now let's talk about Batman and Robin, the fourth and final film of the Tim Burton / Joel Schumacher Batman series. Now, me and my friend Eric did a review of this a number of years ago, actually when I first started doing these Batman reviews. If you want to know more of my thoughts on the movie, just watch that review, because I feel like everything I could say about this movie has already been said by so many other people. It's a bad movie, that's all I'll say, but really, there's nothing I can say about this movie that I didn't already say in that review, and hasn't already been said by so many other people. But guys, what do you think of Batman and Robin?
This movie killed the Batman franchise. This movie is the reason why we never got to see Jack Nicholson as the Joker again. And this movie made a complete mockery of Batman.
So, I take it you like the movie?
All valid points. Everybody kind of goes right to what sucks about this one, so I'm just going to go to one thing I do like. I like Uma as Poison Ivy. I think that she kind of gets the balance right. Beyond that, Clooney just kind of phones it in.
I do think you're smoking something when it comes to Uma Thurman, but okay.
I'm not saying you guys have to agree. It's an acquired taste.
I know.
I respectfully agree to disagree with you.
Clooney really is like phoning it in, and Schwarzenegger is kind of doing it for the paycheck, as much as he's trying to seem joyous and into it.
But you know what? Schwarzenegger, he himself admits he's not the greatest actor in the world, and I think he's actually given somewhat of a genuine performance, I think. I think he's probably the only one who's maybe Michael Goff, because one thing I find to be kind of insulting about the movie is they have this serious subplot about Alfred dying, which could have been great in a better Batman movie, but it's like, okay, you're expecting us to take that subplot seriously in a movie where Batman whips out a credit card?
And skates on ice skates.
Yeah.
So
I think
ice hockey.
Yeah, so I think that's the most insulting thing about it, is you have that serious part in this overall mess of this shitfest, you know?
Goofy, over-the-top shitfest.
Can I get my opinion about this, too? I really don't like this film. It is so bad. It's every time I try to watch it again, it's not even worth watching. I can only watch 5-10 minutes of it. Then after that, I'm like, forget it. I might as well go on the internet and watch Chris Stuckman or Nostalgia Critics review your review to see how bad it is.
Yeah, I mean, George Clooney is so flat and wooden as Batman, and he's even admitted that, he really, sort of only took this role to boost his career. Because he said, even with the terrible reception, that was still the biggest break of my career. He had already, I think, signed his other movie deals, before the movie's disastrous release. And the only line I find to be not good from him, but funny, that I like hearing, is when he says to Dick Grayson, "She's trying to kill you, Dick." Because even though that's the character's name, the way he says it makes it really sound like he's just calling him a dick, and it's hilarious.
Oh yeah, Robin was a whiny bitch in this movie.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Which, to be fair, he was a whiny bitch in Batman Forever, but in that there was more motivation behind his bitchiness because his parents just recently died.
Yeah.
The opening scene, I want a car. Chicks dig the car. Yeah. This is why Superman loves going, "Shut up, Robin!"
Yeah, and it's a shame, especially because those are the lines that the movie opens with.
Yes.
It's like, that's what you open on?
But I want to point something out. They mention Metropolis. I don't know in this movie, but they mention Metropolis in Batman Forever. So, does Superman actually exist in this universe, in this continuity?
That has been a theory for like years of between the Christopher Reeve and Batman, Schumacher, and Tim Burton films throughout the years.
Do you think they're all in the same universe or something?
You know, they could be. We could have had at that time. We possibly could have had maybe a Batman Superman film at that time.
Well, at that time, Christopher Reeve was kind of falling off
paralyzed.
horses.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah.
Tim Burton was gearing up to make his own Superman movie with
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it's sort of maybe a shout out to that.
It could have
As a fan,
been.
You could say it is, but mostly I think it's just meant to be like a throwaway joke.
Yeah, I guess so.
It is fun to think about though as a DC fan.
It is. It kind of makes you think we could have almost had a universe.
Oh, you know what I also want to mention? Another reason I hate this movie. This movie ruined Bane. I mean,
I agree.
He's supposed to be strong and intelligent. In this, he's just Poison Ivy's lackey.
That's the way I
It's
describe Bane.
terrible.
He literally, when he puts the bombs down, he's like, bomb.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, if you read Nightfall, Bane is arguably one of Batman's most intelligent villains.
Yes.
If not maybe his most intelligent villain.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They make him a freaking dunce in this movie.
Yeah, most of the times when he does have dialogue, it's just Bane.
Boom, work. Basically, he's more like the big muscle bound bodyguard / Igor assistant. That's it. That's it.
He was played by a wrestler named Jeep Swenson, who sadly died
Yeah.
a month after the movie's release.
I remember watching like behind the scene footage of like what they did for the makeup process. So one guy joked, thinking Jaws, we need a bigger boat. That guy was freaking. Oh my god.
Yeah, I've
like,
seen behind the scenes
Oh my
photos of Jeep Swenson. He was enormous. And
If you're looking for another good Bane story besides Nightfall, there's Vengeance of Bane, which was
I
think
read that. It's
that's
great.
his first appearance, and
That's
that
a great
really
one.
that gives you a great sense of his character,
Yes.
like the way he kind of processes things, and just like honestly, what a strong motherfucker he is, because he goes through some serious shit in the story.
I do want to. One thing I do kind of enjoy in this movie is John Glover's performance as Jason Woodrow. I mean, he's so over the top, but his over the top is actually funny. I just love when he says, "I'm afraid you'll have to die." Pushing her into the...
I have to admit, that
John,
makes me laugh.
that's not that funny. I want to point out that Poison Ivy's origin is very similar to Selina Kyle's origin in Batman Returns. Like, it's basically the same thing. She gets killed by her boss, comes back from the dead.
Mm-hmm. Although with with Poison Ivy, her revenge is a lot quicker than Selina's.
Oh yeah. Basically, she kisses her boss dead at the end for him.
And actually, Selina technically killed Max Schreck with a kiss, with the electrocution. So it's like almost the same way.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I honestly feel a lot more sympathy for Selina Kyle from Batman Returns than Poison Ivy in this movie.
That's another thing I want to mention. Uma Thurman in this movie is she's so cartoony and over the top. I mean, every line, she has to really just put so much emphasis on it. It's
Yeah,
like
Chris,
too
that's
much.
why I think you're on heroin right now.
He said it's an acquired taste, don't
Oh, what the hell? I am Mother Nature. I mean, it's like...
I'll help you grab your rocks.
That's why every Poison Ivy toy gets off. I forgot the fucking line, but yeah. I mean,
I know what you're talking about, but I forget it too.
yeah, no, this is a despicable movie.
It is.
But I don't like the movie at all. But once again, there's really not much I can say about it that hasn't already been said.
And George Clooney actually recently apologized for helping to kill the Batman franchise with this movie.
I think there was a point where like he was in person giving people back refunds, like if they said they
Really?
saw it and hated it.
Yeah, and I actually read that in his office, he keeps a picture of him as Batman hung on his wall as a reminder for what happens when you accept movie roles solely for money.
Actually, even Schumacher said that he apologized to the franchise.
Oh, no, he absolutely did.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of do feel bad for Schumacher, for what he went through, because it really was not him. It was the studio. Like, they were really like forcing and pushing him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, I had the toys of these movies. Every kid had the toys of these films when this
I had
movie
the
came out.
Batmobile.
Yeah, same with me.
Yeah, that was
I'm not gonna lie. When I was a kid, I liked it, but again, as an adult watching it now, I realized, oh my god, this is so bad.
Yeah, I mean, also they ruined Batgirl in the movie.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
she's supposed to be Commissioner Gordon's
She's not.
daughter, not Alfred's
Niece.
niece.
I'll
And she doesn't have a
def-
British accent.
I'll defend it in this regard. they gave Commissioner Gordon really no character in the first 3 movies, that having his daughter be a prominent character in this one would have been random, considering they really didn't give Gordon that much character in the previous films.
Oh,
I know, but
that,
still,
yeah.
I mean, she could at least have a British accent.
She didn't.
Yeah, because she's Alfred's niece, and she's from, England.
Not only that, why Alicia Silverstone? Like, literally, they couldn't think of a better actress than
yeah.
Alicia Silverstone.
She was kind of an it actress at the time.
I know,
Yeah,
because
this movie killed both her and Chris O'Donnell's careers.
It did.
Yeah, poor Chris O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Actually, what's interesting, even Chris O'Donnell himself, like, also turned out a lot of big major roles when he was, like, just coming up after Batman. He turned down Titanic for this film.
Yeah, I mean, the campiness in this movie just got spiraled out of control, and it was disaster.
I feel like the late 90s was definitely a dark time for comic books. I mean, around this time you also had that Steel movie, or
Tank Girl.
Spawn.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Yeah, I agree, because around this time, they weren't, like, taking comic books that seriously. They just thought it was, like, all, like, campy and not taken seriously, like, until...
I think Blade is the one that really sort of brought it back
Yes,
on track.
it did. Yeah. Even when Blade came out, people were a little skeptical, like, why this character? They couldn't think of any other characters, but people were proven wrong by that.
Because Blade's a badass.
Yeah, I
I
just love Blade.
It might have been because he was difficult to work with, but I gotta say, Val Kilmer really dodged a bullet with this one, with not coming back as Batman for this.
Any closing thoughts on Batman and Robin?
One thing, I will admit, if it wasn't for this film, we would not have the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy. That's the only thing I can say.
I mean, it's terrible all around. I hate it.
Now, what did you think? Because if this movie had done well, there was going to be a 5th one called Batman Triumphant.
And as I mentioned, they were going to bring Jack Nicholson back as the Joker. He was going to play he was going to appear basically as a hallucination in Batman's mind, brought on by the Scarecrow's fear gas.
Wasn't Harley going to be in it?
Yeah, she was going to be his daughter.
That's right.
I heard Jennifer Tilly was going to play the part, and also I don't know why I think that could have been a great one.
It could have been. We never got to see it because of this movie.
Yeah, and wasn't Jeff Goldblum going to play the Scarecrow?
Or Brad Dourif. I heard different rumors about that.
I also heard at one point Howard Stern was going to play the Scarecrow.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have liked that.
No, that would not have... I mean, he's not a bad actor, Howard Stern, just not for Batman movies.
Yeah, but of course this movie failed more miserably than I think anybody could even imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely... It managed to recoup costs, I read, but once the word got out that it was terrible, business stopped dead. And it was definitely a terrible movie.
Oh, there's absolutely a reason this is considered by many to be one of the worst films of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I can't even watch it ironically or like as a so bad it's good movie. It's just like...
See, I can, because like it's fun at times, because like that silly ass scene where he's singing like the Snow Miser song.
Yeah.
I will admit, it does have humor moments at times we have to laugh at it.
It always made me laugh, like
right.
with that. So.
I don't know. For some reason, when I tried watching this, I was bored. Honestly,
right.
I was just bored. It's like I could be watching a good movie right now.
I agree.
It doesn't give you much. So
I mean,
like,
I watched.
It's just, like pure
I
entertainment.
rewatched it for the sake of this podcast, and will never be watching it again.
I try, but I chickened out. I'm guilty. I just can't sit through it. It's just every time I try, it just it just disappoints me how this is how the Burton and Schumacher franchise was ruined. And
as I said before, Batman Forever had flaws, but I think it was passable. This is not even passable.
I will admit, Forever is not as bad. I mean, it's bad, yes, but I don't consider the worst as Batman and Robin. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, for me, it's like I kind of think I hate Batman Forever more only because I love Two-Face so much, and I think the movie kind of just ruined it. Two-Face.